you've decided to install Path of Exile 2. Congratulations on making it both the best and worst decision of your life. This game is notoriously complicated, but today's beginner guide will introduce you to all of the basics and help you to get your new addiction off to a healthy start. Whether you're watching this the day it's released or 5 years into the future, most of this information is so foundational that it will stay relevant. By the end of this, you'll feel less intimidated by the complexities of the game and more certain that this is the forever game that you've been looking for your whole life. Welcome to Path of Exile 2. First off, what even is Path of Exile 2? At its core, PoE 2 is an action RPG in which you play a character that battles through the world, killing monsters to gain higher levels, get better equipment, to get stronger skills, to fight harder monsters, to get more levels, to get better gear, to fight harder monsters, to get better gear. You get the picture. The game is full of challenging bosses, interesting problems to solve, an incredible amount of build crafting and depth, a fascinating economy, and a gameplay loop that is addictive enough that one day you're going to wake up and realize you haven't seen your friends in 6 months, but you'll be totally okay with it because the only thing that you need in your life anymore is that sweet, sweet divine drop sound. The first thing you'll encounter after clicking the login button is the character selection screen. To the right, you have all of your existing characters, and underneath that is the Create button. Hit that and you'll be introduced to the first of many confusing things about Path of Exile 2. Over here we have the League selection and the Game Mode selection. PoE 2 has several game modes and leagues that are available. To the left, we have the Standard League. This is like the Eternal Realm, where your progress will never be reset. To the right, we have the current Challenge League. Every 4 months, a new league will begin, and all players will begin from level 1 on brand new characters. The Challenge League also includes new content for players to discover and explore, incentivizing them to return to the game. At the end of a league cycle, all characters will be migrated to Standard, so your progress isn't lost forever. For new players, I highly recommend starting with the current Challenge League over Standard. For new ARPG players, this often sounds confusing. Why would you want to play in a league where you start with nothing and lose all your progress after 4 months? A reset on equal footing allows everyone to start from a fresh slate without a saturated economy. Once you get into it, you'll understand why this is part of the reason that you'll always come back for more. As for game modes, we have these over here: Solo Self-Found, Hardcore, and by default, we have Softcore Trade. In Softcore Trade, you can trade and party with other players within that same league. And if you die, you can respawn. Solo Self-Found means that you cannot trade or party with other players. For Hardcore, when you die, your character will be migrated to the parent league. For example, if I do Runes of Uldur Hardcore, when I die, I'll be migrated back to Runes of Uldur Softcore. For most Hardcore players, this is the same thing as permanent death. Another thing you can do is combine Hardcore and Solo Self-Found if you're looking for the ultimate challenge. What I recommend is the default Softcore Trade League in the current Challenge League. So for that, it would be Runes of Uldur. Even if you're hopping in late to the current league, once the league ends, it will merge to Standard, so you can continue your progress there if you choose to, so you won't completely lose everything. Let's do it. Now we're at the character selection screen. Path of Exile 2 will have 12 characters at launch. These classes cover all of the classic fantasy archetypes, as well as some more creative ones. You have your Sorceress, which is your classic spellcaster class, wielding the elements to use magic to kill enemies. You can also click these and hover over these to get an idea of the type of skills that they use typically. You also have your Witch, which is like the summoner. Over here, your classic warrior with his big mace, big tanky guy, and you also have cooler stuff like the mercenary who uses crossbows and grenades to kill enemies. Whichever one of these you decide to choose is totally up to you. Don't worry about which one is best. If you think that playing a shape-shifting druid looks cool, go for it. PoE 2 grants all accounts 24 character slots, so you can always try something new if you decide that the first build you play isn't your cup of tea. One other major part of classes is something known as Ascendancies. These are subclasses that further allow you to specialize your character. I'll get into this a bit later, it's a bit complicated, but I just wanted to introduce you to the concept of Ascendancies. Alright, let's make our character. Let's go with a mercenary, click continue, give it a name. Hi, welcome to PoE 2. Waking up on the beach, you'll immediately be able to choose your movement choice. We have WASD, where you can move with the WASD keys, and mouse, which is click to move. This is totally up to you, but as someone who's played ARPGs for my entire life, I've suffered a lot of hand problems by playing with click to move. I default to WASD. It's a lot less pressure on your click hand. Give it a try. If you don't like whichever one you chose, you can press escape, go to options, input, and change your input method to whichever one you prefer. You can also use a controller if you want. Now that we've found our feet, we can interact with a man who will give us a grim introduction to the world of Rayclass. Yeah, he immediately gets murdered by a zombie. But we save the day, and he drops our first weapon. Picking it up introduces us to a few new things. By pressing I by default, this will open up your inventory page. We have a weapon slot. We also have an offhand weapon slot. If you're wielding a two-handed weapon, it'll use both your weapon and your offhand slot. You have your helmet, body armor, gloves, boots, 2 rings, a belt, and an amulet. You also have a secondary weapon, which you can click over here or press X to swap to. Get into more of that a bit later. Down here, you have your inventory, where you can pick up items and store them over here. And now that we've picked up an item, we have our first skill, crossbow shot. Let's go kill something. Here we have a zombie. Pay attention to this bar at the bottom. This is my experience. As I kill stuff, I gain experience, and once I fill this up, I'll gain a level. Now over to the left, we have our life orb. This is pretty self-explanatory. When I take damage, I lose life. But if I want to get life back, I have a life flask. Using my flask will consume a certain number of charges. You can see it has 50 charges, but it consumes 10 of 60 charges on use. You can get more charges by killing stuff. So let's use our flask. As you kill stuff, your flask will slowly recharge. Now, pro tip for newbies, don't underestimate your flasks. Your flasks are very important for staying alive. As you progress throughout the world, you're going to start finding better flasks that you can equip that provide a greater amount of life recovery. Now let's get into some movement. If you push the spacebar, you'll perform a little dodge roll like that. If you push the spacebar and hold it down, you'll sprint. The good side of sprinting is that you move a lot more quickly. The downside is that if something hits you, you're going to get knocked down pretty quickly and be very vulnerable. While you're knocked over, you can't perform any actions. Good way to get yourself killed, so be careful while sprinting. As you can see here, we found a checkpoint. These replenish your life, mana, and flasks, and if you die, you can respawn at the nearest active checkpoint. And around the middle of the first area, you're going to find your first chest. Inside this chest, we'll find our first skill gem. Click that to pick it up, open your inventory, and then you can press G. That will open up your skills panel. You can then click and put this in here, and now we have a new skill, fragmentation rounds. Remember how earlier I said that the sorceress is traditionally the spellcaster class, the mercenary is traditionally the crossbow class? The reason for that is that in Path of Exile 2, skills, unlike in other ARPGs, these are actually items that you can equip on your character. What this means is I could have a mercenary that uses spells or maces. I could have a witch that uses crossbows. This is part of the reason that PoE 2 is so cool, but also the reason why it is so complex. Every character has 9 skill slots by default, and you can see the DPS of your skill over here. This one is 15. This one's only dealing 1 damage. You can also hover over the skill to get a bit more information about it. Now that we have our skill equipped, how do we use it? Down here on our skill bar, we can click any of these slots, and there we can load our new skill. And if you want to clear it, you can just hit this little X. For now, let's load up our fragmentation rounds. Let's use our new skill. You'll notice that this little ball on the right, our mana is going down when we use our skill. Most non-basic skills in PoE 2 consume mana, and like your life flask, you have a mana flask. This will recover your mana over a period of time, and just like your life flask, it consumes charges when used and recovers charges when you kill things. We found an item. We can pick it up, and now it's in our inventory. If you find an unidentified item, you can use a scroll of wisdom to identify it, and then you can equip that. Now, welcome to one of the best parts of Path of Exile 2, bosses. First boss we're going to encounter is the Miller. Let's try to take him down. Don't forget to use your dodge roll. Take down the big boy, and we have leveled up. Now, when you level up, you are granted a passive skill point. Hold on to your horses. This is the moment of true horror in Path of Exile. Welcome to the passive skill tree. I know this is a lot at first glance. This is a make or break moment for a lot of people, especially when you scroll out and realize that it is a whole lot bigger than you initially thought. But don't panic, I'm going to go through this and help it to make sense. I do also have a full guide on the passive tree that I'll link in the description that'll make it a lot less scary. But let's cover the bare basics. Firstly, every class has a starting point on the tree. There's this central area, and from this central area determines your starting point. So for the mercenary, we start at the bottom of the tree. With our passive point that we got from leveling up, we can now allocate a passive point. These ones over here are known as small passives. These grant a minor bonus. So you can see here, 10% increased projectile damage. We can click that and hit apply. Now we have this allocated, and we have 10% increased projectile damage, which slightly increased the damage of our fragmentation rounds, which now deals 2 damage, and our crossbow shot. There are also larger points on the tree, known as notable passives. These grant more bonuses than small passives like this. You can see over here, Remorseless, 15% increased projectile damage, stun buildup against enemies within 2 meters, and a bit of strength and dexterity. These notable passives often relate to the small passives that come before them. So all of these grant projectile damage, and then the big one grants a bit more projectile damage and a little bit extra. This one over here, these grant armor and evasion rating, and then this big one grants a greater amount of armor and evasion rating and some extra bonuses. A good way to start navigating throughout the passive tree is to use these notable passives as your landmark. So you could say, I want to get projectile damage because it's going to increase my damage, and I'm going to be aiming for this. From there, where do I go next? You don't have to go and read through all of these. What I instead recommend doing is just checking out the big notable passives that are nearby. So you can see over here, this one is projectile damage. Over here, area of effect and cooldown. This one is some flask life recovery rate. So you could say, I'm going to go here, and then I'm going to go here. And once I've done that, I could go somewhere else and start looking further out. There is another type of pass point on the passive tree known as a keystone. These provide a major upside with some kind of major downside. Let's check out this one over here. Unwavering Stance. Cannot be light stunned, but you cannot dodge roll or sprint. So there's the big upside. You're getting that benefit that you can't be light stunned, but you're getting a huge downside in that you cannot dodge roll or sprint. Just so that you're aware, there are these types of passives on the tree as well. This also brings up the point of build guides. If you want to follow a build guide, you can check some out. We have tons over on Mobilytics that you can see, but for a first-time player, I do recommend at least giving the game a try without a build guide first, but if you know that you're someone who prefers just playing with a guide, go for it. There's absolutely no shame in it. There's one other kind of passive point, and this brings us to one of the most important core foundational parts of Path of Exile 2, and that is of attributes. So much of Path of Exile 2 revolves around this concept of strength, dexterity, and intelligence. Strength is associated with life and armor, often more tanky builds and melee builds. Dexterity represents quick and evasive combat, often at range. Intelligence is themed around spells and summoning. But there are also 3 hybrid types of attributes: Strength Dexterity, Strength Intelligence, and Dexterity Intelligence. Now remember how I said there were 12 classes in Path of Exile 2? This isn't a coincidence. This is because each class represents an attribute type, and the entire passive tree is broken up to represent this. So at the top, we have our pure intelligence section. This is where our witch and sorceress start, and we get things like spell damage, as you can see over here. Down to the right, this is where our ranger and huntress start, and we get things like projectile damage and movement speed. All things that are representative of dexterity as an attribute. Down here on the bottom left, we have our main strength section. This is where the warrior starts, and we have melee damage and armor. But in between each of these, we have our hybrid types. So over here, this is the intelligence and the dexterity. We have the dexterity intelligence, and we get things like skill speed that's more associated with the dexterity side of things. But over here, we have energy shield. That's more associated with intelligence, and evasion rating more associated with dexterity. Our mercenary is between strength and dexterity. So we have things like projectile damage, but then evasion rating associated with dexterity, and armor, which is associated with strength. And up here, we have a nice hybrid of intelligence and strength, which is where the druid starts, and we have increased area of effect for attacks, more associated with strength. And then on this side, critical spell damage bonus. There's more of your intelligence side of things. One other thing with the passive tree, if there's anything ever confusing, you can press Alt. Not only is it going to show you an increase to the damage of the skills that you might be using, but if you see any underlined words, while holding Alt, you can click that, and then it'll pop up a little box, and you can read anything about that. This is a great way to learn about the game. Slow down, read, and learn. Now that we have that out of the way, let's head into town. Arriving in town, we're going to meet our first NPC vendor, Renly. He thanks us for saving the town by killing the miller, and he grants us our first reward. We have our first Uncut skill gem. If we right-click this, it'll allow us to select a skill. Over here, we can select one of these that we can now use. As a mercenary, it's going to default to crossbow skills. So we already have this fragmentation rounds, but we could also now take armor-piercing rounds, permafrost bolts, and explosive grenades. There's a lot of information here, but one thing you can do is select the skill to play a video just to get an idea of what it looks like. So here we can see this is what explosive grenade looks like. For now, you could say, that looks cool, I want to take that. Same thing over here, we can click this. If you're more into frosty crossbolts, then you can do this. Or armor-piercing rounds, turns it into a Gatling gun. So in PoE 2, skills are more closely linked to weapons than classes. So over on the left, you can see over here, we can look at spear skills or bow skills, or maybe an elemental skill. These are the ones that normally the sorceress will start with, but you could say, I want to try Frostbomb because that looks cool and it might make my crossbow build better. My advice for new players, just stick to these recommended gems for now. You can make a very successful build just by following only the skills in this one window. You don't have to go through all of these because the moment you do that, you're going to get overwhelmed. Another thing is that as you progress, you'll find higher tier uncut skill gems, which can be used to get new skills and to also level up the skills that you already have. Leveling up the skill will generally increase the damage of that skill quite significantly. So pay attention to when you say find a level 3 uncut skill gem, because you'll get access to all of these new skills all the way up to tier 13 uncut skill gems. And then you'll have the full array of skills available to you. Let's cut explosive grenade. And we can control click it to put it straight into our skills page. Remember, you can push G to open this up, You can also just right click on the gem and that'll bring up this page. Let's put it in. And here we have our explosive grenade. You can see the damage over here. One way to assess if you have found an upgrade in the form of a weapon, for example, is to check this number. It's not 1000% accurate, but it's a very good indicator of whether or not you have found an upgrade or not. Now, you may have noticed these little sockets next to each of our skills. These are for support gems. As you go through the world, you'll find uncut support gems. We can right-click this to cut a new support gem. These are gems that affect the damage or function of your skill gems. Let's have a look at our explosive grenade. Click that over here. We have something like fire attunement that gives us extra fire damage at the expense of less cold and lightning damage. We have multi-shot, which causes our grenades to, instead of shooting out one projectile, to instead shoot out multiple projectiles. Or we have something like magnified area. This doesn't increase the damage, but it does increase the area of effect. So we can take this, engrave it, and it'll go straight in. So without this, our grenade shoots out one single grenade, like that. With this, we shoot out 2 additional projectiles, but they deal slightly less damage and have slightly less skill speed. So we shoot out, and now we have 3 grenades. Path of Exile 2 has hundreds of support gems, allowing for tons of customization and creativity with your builds. In order to not become overwhelmed, to start out, you'll have these recommended support gems. I highly recommend checking these out and starting here. All of these gems are going to be good. They might not be the best, but none of them are going to be bad choices. Start here, follow the recommended, and you should be able to make a fairly successful build. However, if you do want to explore the full roster of support gems, you can click all gems over here, and this is a full list. That's why I'm saying for now, stick with recommended rather than all valid, just to make things a little bit easier to start out. One other thing with support gems is there is an associated attribute type. So over here, our multi-shot will require us to have 5 more dexterity to equip it. With this elemental armament gem, this is a red gem, and this requires 5 more strength to use. So as you start equipping more and more support gems, your attribute requirements are going to increase. You can increase your attributes on the passive tree with things like this, or with items that grant additional attributes. And the last thing to do with support sockets is that all skills can be supported by up to 5 sockets. To start out, they'll only have 2 support sockets, but as you travel through the world, you'll find things called Jeweler's Orbs that'll allow you to unlock additional support gem sockets on that skill. This one grants 3, here we have 4, and 5. So if I use this on my skill, I can do that by opening my inventory, right-clicking it, and then clicking the gem. It gets an additional socket, allowing it to be supported by more supports, increasing its damage or improving its functionality in some way. We made it past the skill screen. Let's get to know some folks around town. Every town is going to be full of NPCs known as vendors. These vendors have an inventory of items for sale, but you'll also be able to sell items to them. You have your blacksmith. This guy will sell martial weapons like crossbows, as well as armor. All purchases are made with gold. As you kill monsters or sell items, you'll accumulate gold, which you can see down here. If we want to sell an item, we can sell this. You can see the cost is 14 gold. I can identify it, and we'll see it's now worth 29 gold. We can sell that, and the amount of gold we get goes up. If you want to make a purchase, you can just click it or control click it, and it'll go straight into your inventory. The other kind of vendor we have is our magic vendor. In Act 1, this is Una. Una will sell us things for more caster builds, more intelligence-based things. So staves, as well as scepters and wands. These vendors also sell scrolls of wisdom for 25 gold. You can use that to identify your items. And then they also sell flasks, which again, pay attention to when you see the next tier of flask, can keep you alive. Another important part of vendors is that their inventories will remain static, but once you level up, their inventories will partially refresh. So if you're really desperate for upgrades, once you level up, it's a good idea to head back to town quickly to check the vendors and see if there are any new items available for sale. Each town also has a gambling vendor. These guys, they sell unidentified items and you'll get a random item back of that type. So I could buy a random crossbow and we get this, which is pretty amazing actually early on, but I don't recommend gambling too often. You'll burn through your gold really quickly. I suggest saving this kind of as like a last resort. If you just cannot find any upgrades, the vendors aren't selling good items and you're not picking up good items, you can use this as an absolute panic last resort. One other vendor you'll find in towns around the middle of Act 1 is the Hooded one. This guy provides a few different functions. One of these is to identify all of your items for free without having to use a Scroll of Wisdom, but another important one is refund passives. If you have made a mistake on your passive tree, you can refund passive points with this guy. It has a gold cost that will scale with your character's level, but you can refund these points, take them out, and then apply them anywhere else on your tree that you want. In towns, you also find your well. You can click that to restore your life and fill your flasks. There's also a waypoint. Waypoint can be used to fast travel between various areas of the game. Once we make it out of town, you'll be able to see that we'll find other waypoints and then you can click it to just fast travel to that area. And lastly, you have your private stash. This stash you can use to store all of your items. When you're starting out, you'll just have 4 tabs, which is plenty to start out. If you do decide that you really like Path of Exile 2 and you want to keep your loot more organized, there are some more specialized tabs like your currency tab, map tab. I'll try to make a video going over the different kinds of tabs and which ones are probably the highest value. For now, currency tab, really good one to get early on just to take care of your currency. But this is your stash and you can store this and it'll be shared between all other characters within that league. Let's talk about items. This is the core part of any ARPG. For each of the equipable item slots that exists, there exists a different type of item based on each of these attributes. For example, there is a strength body armor that purely provides armor. You can see that over here. Here we have a pure dexterity body armor that provides evasion rating. Here we have a pure intelligence body armor that provides energy shield. But we also have those hybrids. So here we have armor and evasion rating. This is strength, dexterity, and we also have strength, intelligence, providing armor and energy shield. And over here, we have evasion and energy shield for dexterity and intelligence. This goes for weapons as well. So here, we have this tense crossbow. You can see it requires strength and dexterity. We also have smithing hammer, requires strength. Quarterstaff, requiring dexterity and intelligence. Bows, pure dexterity. And we have our caster ones that require intelligence. And all of the skills that are used with these match this pattern. So for example, our crossbow requires strength and dexterity. We're playing a mercenary, which is on the strength dexterity side of the tree. And explosive grenade, we can see over here, this requires strength and dexterity. So this is where that theme of attributes comes in. But items also have different tiers within their category, and you'll start finding items with higher base defense or damage as you travel through the world. That probably sounds confusing, but let me explain. So over here, we have a tattered robe. This we can equip from level 1 and it provides 28 energy shield. In fact, it doesn't even have an intelligence requirement. But later on, we'll find something like this, a vile robe. This requires a higher level, provides a greater amount of energy shield, but also has a higher intelligence attribute requirement. So we can check this out here and compare it to this. So these are our intelligence body armors. The same is for all of these. You'll find better evasion rating body armors, better strength body armors, and the same thing with weapons. So over here, we have a makeshift crossbow. This you can equip from level 1, but further out into the world, you'll start finding a tense crossbow. The difference is here. This has base physical damage of 7 to 12. This one has base physical damage of 8 to 15. And further down the line, we'll find something like a sturdy crossbow, which has 11 to 26 physical damage. So it's worth paying attention to when new tiers of item bases become available, because they have the potential to be better than their lower tier counterparts. But not always. Which brings us to our next topic, item modifiers and very basic crafting. Items in Path of Exile 2 appear in 4 different rarity types that affect how many modifiers that item can have. A modifier is any line of text over here that affects how that item functions. We have 4 different rarity types. So we have normal, which is white, we have blue, which is magic, rare, which is yellow, and unique items, which are orange. Normal items have 0 modifiers. Magic items can have up to 2 modifiers. Rare items can have up to 6 modifiers. And unique items have special modifiers and they can't really be altered, at least not easily. This brings us to some very basic crafting and the introduction of currency orbs. As you go through the world, you'll stumble upon these items known as currency orbs, and these allow you to upgrade the equipment that you find. Let's look at some of the basic ones. For example, we have an Orb of Transmutation. This upgrades a normal item to magic with 1 modifier. We can use that now on our makeshift crossbow. We got 3 to 5 fire damage. Since magic items can have 2 modifiers, how do we get another one? We have this over here, Orb of Augmentation. Augments a magic item with a new random modifier. So we can add that on. Got a bit of crit chance. But now since magic items are limited to 2 modifiers, the only way to get more is to make the item rare. We can do that with a Regal Orb. This upgrades a magic item to a rare item and adds an additional modifier. So now we can do that and we get an additional modifier. The item is also now rare, so it can have up to 6 modifiers. If we want to add more modifiers to a rare item, we can use an Exalted Orb. Augments a rare item with a new random modifier. We can use this and get it all the way up to 6 modifiers. All of these modifiers are going to improve the equipment you find. For example, here we have a white makeshift crossbow, and you can see it has 7 to 12 physical damage. This one, however, has 42% increased physical damage. That's going to increase this base amount by 42%, and it also adds 3 to 7 physical damage. So that's going to increase the damage of this weapon. So this is how you improve your gear in the game. You can also just find items on the ground or gamble them or get them from vendors, but item modifiers are how you improve your gear. The same is going to be true for armors. So something that has like 50% increased armor will increase that base armor amount. As you progress, you'll also find not only better item bases. So for example, you'll start, instead of finding makeshift crossbows, you'll find a sturdy crossbow, but the modifiers that can appear on the items have tiers that can be higher, and these provide more of a damage or a defensive boost. So for example, tier 8 physical damage might give us 40 to 49%, tier 7 will give an increased amount, and as you progress, you'll start finding higher item tier modifiers. But don't overlook these. Modifiers make a big difference. For example, let's just have a look at this white basic crossbow. With this, our explosive grenade deals 19 damage. With this one that we gambled earlier, let's see how much damage we deal. We go from 19 damage on our explosive grenade to 41. This more than doubles our damage. So my recommendation to new players is really pay attention to your weapon, especially if you feel like you're not dealing enough damage. this is where you're going to be getting a large amount of your damage. There are tons of different currency items in Path of Exile 2. This is just a very brief overview. I have a full crafting for noobs guide that you can check out. I'll link it in the description. But once you get into the game a bit more, I'd recommend checking it out just to understand a bit better how items themselves work. But now another way to improve your gear is with Augments. You can find runes throughout the world that can be socketed into items with sockets. So you've been seeing these ones, these have little sockets, but in these we can insert these runes. Depending on what you socket these into, it'll give you a different bonus. Some of these examples include things like increased physical damage if I put it in my weapon. So over here, 7 to 12 physical damage goes up to 8 to 14. There's also ones that could add cold damage to my weapon, or if I put it in my armor, grant me additional resistance that I'll get into later, or maybe even something like I want a bit of extra dexterity. So you can improve your gear even further with these sockets. In order to add sockets to items, you can find Artificer's Orbs. These add a socket to your item. Two-handed weapons can have 2 sockets. Your body armor can have 2 sockets. The rest of your gear can only have 1 socket. But now, what if you're running out of currency orbs? Usually you'll find enough of the basic ones I described, as long as you're not wasting them. But another useful vendor function is that of Disenchanting, which you can do at the magic vendor. By disenchanting items, instead of getting gold for selling them, you'll be granted shards. If you get a full stack of these, you'll be granted a full orb. Magic items break down into transmutation shards. 10 of these becomes an orb of transmutation. Rare items can be broken down for regal shards, which become a full regal orb. This guy over here, the one we use to upgrade from magic to rare, adding 1 modifier. Later on, you'll also discover a salvage bench, which you can use to break down equipment for their core parts. If we break down an item with a socket, we'll get an Artificer's Shard. 10 of these becomes an Artificer's Orb. We also can break down an item with quality. A weapon with quality will break down into Blacksmith's Whetstones. These can be used to improve the quality of a martial weapon. Improving the quality increases the base amount of damage it deals. So if we use these, you can see the physical damage goes from 8 to 14, 8 to 15, 9 to 15, all the way up to 20%, which is the maximum, 10 to 16. If we want to salvage armor with quality, we get back armor as scraps, which improves the quality of an armor, increasing the base amount of defense that it grants, up to a maximum of 20%. Again, all of this is a very, very brief introduction to crafting, but once you get the basics out of the way, I highly recommend checking out Crafting for Noobs to get a better understanding of how items in Path of Exile 2 work, and get an introduction to the rather complex crafting mechanics of this game. Before we step into the world, let's quickly discuss some defenses. Path of Exile 2 doesn't pull its punches, and you might find yourself struggling early on. Having a brief overview of the different defenses will help you to survive. As mentioned earlier with items, the primary defenses are armor, evasion rating, and energy shield. We can push C to bring up our character page where we can learn more about these. Over here we have armor. Armor is used to reduce physical damage from hits. Evasion rating gives us a chance to completely avoid taking damage from an incoming hit. Energy shield functions almost as like a secondary life pool. It will protect our life and take damage before our life does. Once our energy shield is depleted, our life will start taking damage. The next layer of defense is that of resistances. We have fire, cold, lightning, and chaos resistance. Your resistances will reduce the amount of incoming damage of a certain damage type. These can be capped up to 75% by default, and the way that this works is fairly straightforward. If I have 0% fire resistance and take a hit of 100 fire damage, I will take 100 damage. If I have 50% fire resistance, I will only take 50 of that 100 fire damage. And if I have 75 fire resistance, which is the default cap, I would only take 25 damage. Your resistances are very important, so don't overlook them. Getting them capped to 75% isn't going to be possible early on, but as you near the end of the campaign, it's a good idea to start trying to make sure that these are as close to 75% as possible. One caveat, getting your chaos resistance to 75% isn't as easy as your other resistance types, but it's also not necessarily as urgent as getting your fire, cold, and lightning capped as soon as possible. Try to get as much chaos resistance as you can, but don't be surprised if you're sitting at 20% chaos resistance while all of these other ones are at 75%. That is okay early on. Another defensive layer is that of charms. Charms are similar to flasks. These gain charges as you kill monsters, and once a certain condition is met, they will trigger, granting you a defensive bonus for a short period of time. For example, we have this one over here. When we take lightning damage from a hit, it grants us additional lightning resistance for a short period of time, 4.8 seconds, which you can see at the top here. You can get additional charm slots from belts. You can see this one has 2 charm slots, and you can have up to a maximum of 3 charm slots. There are several different kinds of charms. There's ones that grant additional resistances, like these ones over here, but there's also ones that will trigger to prevent some kind of negative ailment. For example, this one, a thawing charm, will trigger once you become frozen, and it'll grant you immunity to freeze, effectively rendering that freeze null. There's ones for cannot be stunned when you get stunned. This one makes you immune to ignite when you're ignited. So if you need to top off your resistances to get them a bit higher, you can use things like this. Another one that can be really good is this anti-freeze charm. I'm not going to get too much into ailments, but if you take a lot of cold damage, you can be affected by freeze, which effectively makes your character unable to move. So something like a freeze charm can be good. Once you play the game and get into it, you'll be able to figure out exactly which ones you want to use, but just so that you're aware of it, there are these charms. Now, because that was a lot, what I'm going to do now is give you my 3 biggest tips for defense for new players. Firstly, try to get life on your gear and aim for about 250 to 300 more life by the time you reach the end of the act. Path of Exile is broken up into acts. These are like story parts where you'll travel through a section of the world, fight a boss at the end, and then progress to the next act. These are fairly large, so aiming for 250 to 300 life per act is a good baseline to aim for. Another very useful thing in the first act is trying to get a bit of armor. There is evasion rating. This will prevent you from taking hits sometimes, but when you do take the hit, you'll still take the full amount. Whereas armor will reduce the incoming physical damage, which can be a big problem for characters. So even if you're playing a witch, something like this Rusted Cuirass can help with surviving the first few areas of the game. And the next one is to pay attention to your resistances. It's going to be impossible to cap them out early on, but trying to get them as high as possible will make a big difference to your survivability. And a bonus tip, I've hopped on it on and on, but it's only because it's so important, is to upgrade your life flasks as new ones become available. You can see this is a level 1 life flask. It provides 50 life over 3 seconds. By level 10, this one has a modifier on it that changes the amount that it recovers. This is more than 4 times more life recovery than this one. So last tip is upgrade your flasks. Really pay attention to that. One of the most common questions asked by new players is, how do I know if what I have found is an upgrade? Many other ARPGs have simplified this with a power rating system or a giant green arrow that lets you know immediately that the item you found is better. But Path of Exile 2 doesn't make it as obvious. What I'm going to do now is go through the different item types, show you how to assess whether or not it could be an upgrade. This is going to be true across the board always, but the main thing we need to assess is the improvement to our damage and our defenses. For our weapon, the most important thing in almost all cases is going to be the damage that it grants you. Over here, we have a makeshift crossbow. If we push G, we can see our skills. With this crossbow, we're dealing 19 damage. If we were to find this, we could equip it and say, all right, is this an upgrade? Well, our damage went from 19 to 29. It's an upgrade. But now later on we find this guy that we crafted earlier. Is this an upgrade? Well, let's see. Our damage went from 29 to 44. The DPS meter isn't always 100% accurate, but it is a very good baseline. There's also this little arrow next to the DPS meter, which you can click to get more information. This can be quite overwhelming, but over here you can get more detail about the skills, such as the total damage, the physical damage, the attack speed, number of projectiles fired, and if a skill, such as fragmentation rounds, has a lot of layers to it, you can look at the different functions that it has on this page. So you can see the projectile damage, you can see the damage versus frozen enemies. All this information is here. You don't have to worry about this too much, but as you get more into the game, if you want more information, you can check that. Now for your body armor and helmet, indicators of whether or not something is an upgrade can be seen by opening the character page with C. You're generally looking for defensive boosts here, such as increases to your life, increases to your defenses such as armor, evasion, energy shield, and importantly, your resistances. Let's see over here. This one grants us 41 armor and 28 energy shield. Doesn't give us any resistances. Let's see what else we have. There's this over here. This grants us 45 armor and 16 life. So this gives us a little bit more armor, but less energy shield. This could be considered an upgrade compared to this. But what if we found this guy over here? This has evasion rating, doesn't have any life, and it does have a little bit of lightning resistance, which could be useful. Over here, this one gives us a lot more armor, it gives us life, and it gives us resistances. This would be a very obvious upgrade. It's giving us all the stuff we want. More defense, more life, and more resistances. That's generally what you're looking for on body armors. And the same goes for your helmets. For example, this guy, it gives us a base amount of armor, which will reduce incoming physical damage. You can see armor goes up. It also gives us some intelligence, which might be useful for equipping different skills or different items. It gives us a little bit of life regeneration rate and accuracy, but no resistances. So if you were struggling and you really needed some extra fire resistance, you could look at this guy and we can compare these two. You can push Alt, click the little pin in the corner, and then we could look at these two. This guy gives us a bit more life, but it doesn't give us any resistance. In this case, you could say this one might be better, but it doesn't give us armor, does give us evasion rating, and this is where, again, the complexity of Path of Exile comes in. It's a balancing act. There's no big green arrow. It's kind of up to you to learn and determine what you need. If you're getting killed by a lot of fire damage, you'll be able to see big fireballs flying at you. You might say, hey, I need fire resistance. I'm going to lose a bit of life and armor and instead equip this guy. But those are the kinds of things you're looking for on your helmet and armor. Let's look at gloves. The kind of modifiers you're looking for depend on the class or the build that you are playing. For attack-based builds, like our crossbow guy, things like adds damage to attacks is going to be a major increase to your character's damage, and you can find this on gloves. So without these gloves, our damage is 39. With them, it's 44. So attack-based builds are going to highly value this modifier on gloves. For builds using spells, spells are not attacks, so this wouldn't apply to any spells we had equipped. Spellcasters are probably going to look for more things like life, resistances, similar to your body armor and your helmet, and those modifiers are also going to be good for attack-based builds, so more resistances, life, damage to attacks, those types of modifiers. Now for our boots, one of the most valuable modifiers is going to be increased movement speed. If you find boots like this has increased movement speed. Many players would consider this an upgrade early on over a pair of boots that, something like this. These have more armor, they have more life and resistance, but they don't have movement speed. Having that extra movement speed doesn't only make your character go faster, but it actually provides a very strong defensive boost. The other modifiers you're looking for are often life, resistances, and defenses. There are also our jewelry slots, our rings over here, our amulet, and our belt. Belts are generally quite defensive. You're looking for things like life and resistances, and as discussed earlier, increases to your number of charm slots. Belts often also provide increased effectiveness of our flasks, so belts looking for life resistances and improved flask and charm effectiveness. Now rings often have what is known as an implicit. This is a modifier that exists on the item regardless of its rarity. So you can see this is a white item. Earlier I said white items could have 0 modifiers, but some items have this implicit. This exists on the item no matter what. And these can be a nice boost to your resistances, or maybe an iron ring. This has a 1-4 physical damage to attacks implicit. These implicits can be enough to top off your resistances. Often on rings, you're looking for life, resistances, also attributes can be really good. So even though this guy gives me a lot of cold damage to attacks, if I was dying a lot to lightning damage, I could say, hey, I'm going to lose that bit of cold damage and fire resistance, and instead equip this guy because it gives me the lightning resistance that I need. It's a balance, and you'll have to figure it out as you go, but these implicit modifiers can be a really big upgrade during the campaign on their own. And our last slot, we have amulets. Amulets provide a variety of bonuses. Often these can be damage-based, things like critical damage. They can also grant us resistances, and they also have implicits. Some of them will grant us attributes, like this one grants us strength, this one grants us intelligence, this one grants us extra life, and the kinds of mods you're looking for here depend on your character, but it can be a kind of top off if you need more attributes to equip your gear and skills, or something like this that provides additional resistances. So how do you know if you've got an upgrade? It's about comparing what you had versus what you're getting. Something that could give you a ton of life might not be as good as something that gives you less life but a lot of resistances. So use your skill page to compare your damage and your character page to compare your defensive bonuses. That's how you determine whether or not the item you found is an upgrade or not. Let's discuss another resource that I've left out until now. I've shown you life and mana, but there's also a resource called Spirit. Spirit can be used to activate permanent buff skills that grant bonuses. Once you get around the middle of Act 1, you'll find the King in the Mist, defeat him, and gain some Spirit. And he'll also drop an Uncut Spirit Gem. These can be used to gain these permanent buff skills. These skills can then be activated. Let's use Wind Dancer. We can put it in our skill page, and then you can right-click it to activate it. And now you will gain the bonus of this permanent buff gem. Wind Dancer, while active, grants stages of a buff that gives you more evasion rating per stage. Being hit by an enemy while you have this buff consumes all stages to damage and knock back enemies around you. Almost all builds are going to make use of at least one or several permanent buff gems like this. This one also has something called Attrition, which grants us increased damage against an enemy the longer they're in our presence. So these aren't active skills that you use like our explosive grenade, but they are just auras that affect your character and improve them. We've been in town this whole time and not actually playing Path of Exile 2. Let's do it. Exiting the Clearfell encampment, you can click the entrance to the next area and that will load it in. At the start of every area, you'll find a checkpoint. These can also be clicked to travel between other checkpoints that you find within the area. You'll also find a waypoint within most areas that allow you to fast travel to that area. And if you ever want to head back to town, there's a town portal button. You can either click that or push the default button. There's a little cast animation, and you can quickly travel back to town at a moment's notice. While you're in town and in the world, you'll be granted quests, which can be seen on the right side of the screen. Search Clearfell and find the Mudburrow entrance, slay the Devourer in its lair. You can also press U to bring up the Overworld Map. These are all the areas. We're currently in Clearfell, and up at the top right, there is our quest log, where we can see the quests with a little bit more information, as well as if you click it, it'll show you exactly where to go, and it'll also show you what the reward is. On the Overworld map, you'll also see these skulls and little icons. These little icons are kind of events. There's a mysterious campsite with a chest. If you see this, it can be worth searching out for a guaranteed reward. There's also these skulls. Skulls imply that there is some kind of boss in the area. If you see a skull with a little plus icon, you'll get some kind of permanent buff for defeating that boss. Let's go find Beinnger and kill her and see what we get. Now, on the way to Beinnger, we've stumbled upon something known as a mechanic. Mechanics in Path of Exile are special events that have a theme that grant some kind of reward. There's some kind of unique challenge that is introduced, and by completing it, you'll be granted items or special items that can only come from that. So let's speak to Pharaoh. He introduces himself, tells us to go over to this stone, and this introduces us to the first mechanic. So we can click this, and it allows us to choose our reward. Let's pick an Orb of Transmutation. Combine the runes. And from the mechanic spawns a whole lot of enemies. Most mechanics are going to spawn a whole lot of enemies that are trying to kill you, and if you can successfully take them down, you will be granted the Spoil of War. There we go. Some Scroll of Wisdom and Orbs of Transmutation. Path of Exile 2 has tons of mechanics like this that will be introduced to you as you progress. I won't go into too much details about all of them, but if you suddenly see a giant weird green crack in the earth spilling out monsters, you'll know that you found a League mechanic. These are often quite challenging, but worth doing. You'll get a lot of experience for killing the monsters, and the rewards that they grant can often be quite good. Now let's continue on our way to Beinnger to see what permanent buff she has. You can navigate with this little corner map. You can see there's the X, that's my player. You can also push tab to get a map overlay. You can adjust how bright it is by going into Options, UI, and then changing the landscape transparency. So it might look like something like this for you. I like keeping it like this. It's up to you. Let's go find Beinnger. And here she is. The first boss. Let's kill her. So with Beinnger, we've killed her, and like I said, she drops some kind of permanent buff because of that plus. This one is a quest item. Right-click to crush it, undoing the Crone's Curse, and it grants us a permanent plus 10% to cold resistance. You can see our cold resistance went up. As you travel throughout the world, there are plenty of these, so it's worth keeping a lookout for them. Some of them grant additional skill points, resistances, spirit, life. Keep a lookout for these because they're very important to do. And over here we found our waypoint, which we can use to travel back to town if we want. Or if we're in town, we can travel back to the waypoint. Here's the Mudburrow. As our quest says, we can go in. If you find a new area, you can click it to enter. I want to discuss another important topic that is somewhat complex but very important to understand, and that is of tags. Understanding tags can help you with figuring out how to improve your damage, defenses, and how to build your character. Let's have a look at this. Over at my explosive grenade, I can push Alt and pin it. You can see all this information about the skill. Here's the name of it, and right underneath is whether or not it is an attack, or a spell, or some other kind of skill. The first tag is that this is an attack. This means that modifiers, such as on my gloves, increased damage to attacks will affect this skill. Underneath that, we have AoE, Area of Effect. This means that if there is something on my passive tree, such as increased area of effect, it will affect this skill. Also, projectile. Over here, we had increased projectile damage. Because of this tag, projectile, that means this will affect this skill. There's also the grenade tag, meaning that points on the tree, such as this, grenade skills have +1 use. This will affect this. All of these tags help you to understand how to scale this skill to improve its effectiveness. So if you're ever wondering, how do I make my fragmentation rounds deal more damage? Firstly, upgrading your weapon's a good idea, but you can also always check these tags. If you don't understand why something like melee damage doesn't make your projectile skill go up, it's because a projectile skill doesn't have the melee tag. So keep a look out for these. I don't want to go too much into detail about these, but I did want to draw your attention to it. Let's discuss Ascending. Ascendancies are subclasses that allow your character to gain new power and further specialize your build. Currently, all classes have 3 different Ascendancies for a total of 36 Ascendancies across all classes. I am playing a Ranger, and one of the Ranger's Ascendancies is the Deadeye. This is like a mini sub-passive tree that is special to this class. For example, this passive point grants us Skills Fire and additional projectile. This is an especially powerful thing that you won't find on the passive tree normally, but with these Ascendancy points, you can gain special bonuses and even new skills that you can't get anywhere else. How do you ascend? Well, the first time you'll be able to ascend is in Act 2. Within the Traitor's Passage, you'll find a boss called Balbala, and she'll drop an item called a Jinn Barrier. With that, you can travel to the Trial of the Sekimas. The Trial of the Sekimas is a multi-floor dungeon with a boss at the end that you'll need to defeat, and once you defeat it, you'll be granted 2 Ascendancy passive points. So the first 2 points could go here and here. Every character can have up to 8 Ascendancy passive points. You can gain additional points by completing harder Ascendancy challenges. As you travel through the world, you'll find different Jinn barriers with a higher level, and they will indicate whether or not those unlock additional Ascendancy passive points. You can see that over here. Completing this Ascension trial will grant additional Ascendancy skill points, up to a maximum of 8. The whole process of ascending could be a whole video on its own. I want to introduce you to this. I don't want to spoil it though, because it is a fun challenge. A lot of people can't stand it. I personally love it. I'm just drawing your attention to the fact that you can ascend to get new power on your character. Once you reach Act 3, you'll actually encounter a second way to ascend, which is in the Temple of Chaos. So there are different Ascendancy challenges that you can complete that will unlock additional Ascendancy passive points. This one is like a multi-floor challenge room where you're going to be affected by debuffs as you travel. There's a boss at the end. If you defeat that boss, you will gain 2 additional Ascendancy passive points. In the future, perhaps by the time you're watching this video, there will be a third method of ascension known as the Trial of the Ancestors. You can use any one of these 3 methods to ascend, depending on which one you prefer. The point is to not overlook your Ascendancy. These challenges can be quite tough, so you don't have to do them right away, but don't put them off, because this is the core of character design in Path of Exile 2. Now, as you travel further into Path of Exile, you're going to start seeing a lot of items on the ground. One thing that is really tough for new players is knowing what to pick up, and also sorting through the huge amounts of loot that drops. Luckily, there are things known as item filters. You can go to Options and load any item filter that you have. I'll go into how to find these, but a filter will change the drops from what you just saw to this. And you can get different filters that are more strict, that hide a greater number of items, making it easier to see what you want. And you can also create your own filters. something like this is very strict, but it makes seeing what I actually want to pick up a lot easier. Unfortunately, this cannot be done in-game. There's a website made by someone known as Neversync called filterblade.xyz, where you can get very generic filters. I'm going to actually link his YouTube channel. Filters can be quite complex. Don't worry, you don't have to make your own one, but I'll link his YouTube channel where he has some very basic guides on filters and how to get your own filter to filter out loot. A lot of content creators will also share filters, but what I recommend is trying out one of Neversync's basic filters. What I also recommend is maybe checking out a video from someone like Schwingy or Miso X Shiro, two great content creators on filters to learn a bit more about them and how to get your own. But having a filter, once you make it into the end game, is borderline mandatory, I would say. And the final thing, a huge part of Path of Exile is that of trading items with other players. PoE 2 has an inbuilt market. You can reach this by pushing / on your keyboard. I believe this is unlocked in Act 4, but with the market, you can search for items that you want to buy. You can type the name of the item. If there's a particular unique, if you're following a build guide, it says buy gold rim. You can type that in and search for it, and then you can click this to travel to the hideout of another player. Once you arrive there, there will be the item. It'll have a cost. This person has listed it for 10 Exalted Orbs, and it also has a gold cost, so we can buy that item from them. Because this is a fairly complex topic, and this is a beginner guide, you're not going to need to trade right away. I will link a trade site guide that I have made, which goes into more detail, explaining how to use this in depth. For now, I'm just drawing your attention to it. That should be everything you need to get a good start in Path of Exile 2. This game is amazingly complex, and we've only just scratched the surface. I haven't even gone into the end game. That's a whole other can of worms. Just know that once you've finished the campaign, there is so much more fun waiting for you. If I were to give a couple of pieces of advice to a new player, the first thing is to just read stuff. Remember, you can push Alt and click it to read, to learn. The next piece of advice, I would say, is to join a community. If you want, you can follow me on Twitch. You can also join my Discord. I'll link it in the description. One of the great things about Path of Exile 2 is that the community knows how complicated this game is, and for that reason, they love helping out new players. So if you join the Discord, don't feel embarrassed if you don't know anything. You don't have to caveat all your messages with, I'm sorry for asking this, I'm new. Don't worry about it. No matter how basic the question is, don't feel afraid to ask. You can also join streams and ask questions there. All experienced players want new players to love this game as much as they do. So join the Twitch, join Discord, check out my other guides that I'll link in the description, and that's it. If you have any other questions, leave it in the comments below. If you want me to cover a specific topic, also let me know. But that's going to be it. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Stay safe. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you enjoyed the video, and enjoy having your life ruined by this wonderful game. Take care. Bye-bye.